You're standing in front of a weathered fence post. The paint is peeling. The wood underneath is soft, black in spots, and starting to crumble in your fingers. You painted that post 8 years ago, maybe 10. You used the expensive stuff. The can promised 15 years of protection. It lied. Now picture a barn, music, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. The siding on that barn is 140 years old. Nobody has painted it, music. Nobody has sealed it. It has stood through blizzards, floods, and summers hot enough to melt shingles. And the wood is still solid. You can knock music on it and hear that tight, dry thud that tells you the fibers inside are as strong as the day the tree came down. The Amish are not using paint. They never did. They use a white powder that costs about $1 a pound at any farm supply store. And when you mix it right, music, it turns ordinary lumber into something that outlives the man who cut it. I spent 3 summers driving through Holmes County, Ohio, asking questions nobody else was asking. Music. What I found out there changes everything you thought you knew about protecting wood. And by the end of this video, I'm going to tell you the exact Music 1887 recipe a Pennsylvania farmer wrote down in a ledger that sat in a barn loft for over a century. It works on the deck you already own. It works on the fence you already built. You do not need to start from scratch. The first time I saw it applied, I was standing in a workshop outside Millersburg. Music, an older man, maybe 70, was stirring a bucket with a wooden paddle. The mixture looked like thin milk. He was coating a new hog shed with it using a brush made from horsehair. I asked him how often he had to redo it. He looked at me like I had asked a foolish question. He said his grandfather coated the main barn once in 1923. That was the last time it had been touched. I did not believe him. I wrote it off as exaggeration. Old country talk. Then I started digging. The powder is called hydrated lime. Calcium hydroxide. Music. You can buy a 50 lb bag at Tractor Supply for under $20. That works out to about 40 cents per pound. I rounded up to $1 because most folks only need a few pounds for a weekend project. And even with the brush in the bucket, you are still spending less than the price of a single gallon of exterior paint. Music. But the powder is only half the secret. The other half is what you mix it with. And this is where the Amish diverge completely from every modern recommendation you will read online. Paint companies want you to believe that wood needs to be sealed, coated, wrapped in a layer of plastic or latex that keeps moisture out. The problem is that wood breathes. It expands and contracts with temperature and humidity every single day. When you trap a living material under a layer of plastic, you create a pocket where moisture gets in through the tiniest crack and then cannot escape. That is why your music deck rots from underneath. That is why your fence posts fail at the ground line. The paint music did not fail. The paint did its job. It sealed the wood so completely that the wood suffocated and rotted from the inside. Hydrated lime does the opposite. It penetrates. It bonds with the cellulose fibers at a molecular level, and it lets the wood breathe while making it chemically hostile to the fungi, insects, and bacteria that cause decay. Penn State Extension published a study in 2014 looking at traditional lime washes on agricultural structures in the Pennsylvania Dutch country. The researchers documented buildings dating back to the 1860s where the original lime treatment was still active in the top layer of the wood. 150 years later, the report noted that lime-treated wood showed decay rates roughly 80% lower than untreated controls over a 30-year observation window. 80%. Music. Think about what that means for the fence you are looking at right now. But here is where it gets interesting, and here is where the paint industry has a problem. In 1936, the Department of Agriculture published Farmer's Bulletin number 1756. It was a technical document aimed at rural homeowners. That bulletin described in plain English how to mix lime with skim milk, salt, music, and a small amount of linseed oil to create what they called a casein whitewash. The formula produced a coating that the USDA's own testing showed lasted between 20 and 50 years depending on exposure. The bulletin ran for a few editions, then it quietly disappeared from the recommended list. By the late 1950s, the same Department of Agriculture was publishing glossy pamphlets recommending commercial alkyd paints. The chemical companies had arrived. The lime recipe was inconvenient. It did not generate repeat business. A product that lasts 50 years is a product you sell exactly once per lifetime. I pulled a copy of that 1936 bulletin from the National Agricultural Library archive last winter. It is still there. It has been digitized. Nobody reads it because nobody knows to look for it. And the man who wrote it, a government extension specialist named Wallace Ashby, spent his career documenting the building techniques of Pennsylvania German farmers. His notes from that period are preserved in the Cornell Agricultural Archive. Ashby understood that the Amish were not being traditional for the sake of tradition. They were being practical. They had figured out through 200 years of trial and error that the cheapest materials on Earth mixed correctly would outperform anything a laboratory could produce. Now here is where you start to feel the weight of it. Every 10 years, the average American homeowner spends between $800 and $1,200 repainting a fence, a shed, or a deck. Over a 50-year period, that is roughly $5,000 per structure. Multiply that across a typical property with a house, a garage, a fence, and a couple of outbuildings, and you are looking at $20,000 to $30,000 spent on paint over a lifetime, all to protect wood that could have been protected permanently with a bag of powder and a gallon of skim milk. The paint aisle at your local hardware store is not there to help you. It is there to keep you coming back. Now, if you already own a house and you are thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need to strip anything. You do not need to sand down to bare wood. You do not need a contractor, a permit, or a single piece of specialized equipment. The Amish method works on wood that has already been painted, wood that is weathered, wood that is cracked, and wood that is starting to show the first signs of decay. Here is what you do. Pick a weekend when the music forecast is dry for 3 days. Take a stiff wire brush and go over the surface of whatever you want to protect. You are not trying to remove paint. You are trying to open up the pores. If there is loose flaking paint, knock it off. If there are soft spots that have started to rot, dig out the punky wood with a screwdriver until you hit solid material. Do not worry about making it look pretty. You are going to coat it. Mix your lime wash in a 5-gallon bucket. Start with 4 quarts of skim milk. It must be skim. Whole milk has too much fat, and the coating will go rancid. Add 1 lb of hydrated lime, slowly stirring with a wooden stick the whole time. Never use metal because lime reacts with certain metals and weakens the bond. Add 1/4 cup of table salt. Music, the salt acts as a mild antifungal and helps the mixture cure harder. Finally, add 1 TBSP of raw linseed oil. That is the Amish refinement. The oil is what gives the coating its waterproofing punch. Brush it on thick. Do not spray it. A horsehair brush or a wide natural bristle brush works best. The coating goes on looking thin and milky, almost translucent. Let it dry for 24 hours. Then apply a second music coat. That is it. You are done. For a standard 1,000 square foot fence, your total material cost is somewhere between $15 and $25. The coating will cure over the next 2 weeks into a hard, slightly chalky surface that bonds with the wood at a level no paint can reach. Now you are going to notice something strange in the first rainstorm after you apply it. The water will beat up on the surface for the first few days. Music, then it will appear to soak in slightly. That is not failure. That is the calcium carbonate crystallizing inside the wood fibers. The coating is actually getting harder every time it rains. Penn State's extension work confirmed this. The stuff does not wear off. It cures into the wood itself and becomes part of the structure. After about a month, you can scrape it with a knife and it will not come off. You are not looking at a layer of paint sitting on top of the grain. You are looking at wood that has been chemically transformed into something tougher than the tree it came from. I tested this myself on a section of cedar fence behind my own property in 2021. I coated one 10F section with the Amish recipe. I left the section next to it with the commercial deck stain I had been using for 20 years. 3 full winters later, the stained section is flaking, dark around the ground line, and starting to splinter. The lime wash section looks almost exactly the same as the day I coated it. Slightly grayer, slightly more weathered in a natural way, but solid. Knock on it and you hear the same dry, tight thud I heard on those barns in Holmes County. You might be wondering why, if this is so effective and music so cheap, you have never heard of it before. The answer is not a conspiracy in the dramatic sense. Music, it is something more ordinary and more honest. There is no marketing budget for a bag of lime. There is no advertiser paying to put this recipe in front of you. Home improvement shows are sponsored by the companies that sell the expensive alternatives. Your local hardware store stocks the bag of lime on the bottom shelf in the garden section, unlabeled for this purpose, because there is no margin in telling you what it can actually do. The knowledge was never destroyed. It was simply outspent, drowned out by 100 years of advertising, pushed to the back of a shelf, forgotten by everyone except the families, music who never stopped using it. But I told you at the start of this video that I had something specific. A recipe from 1887, a farmer's ledger that sat in a barn loft for over a century. This is the part where you want to pay attention, because music, this is the refinement that turns the basic Amish method, music, into something that Wallace Ashby himself never wrote down. This is the detail that was passed hand to hand from grandfather to grandson, and never made it into any government bulletin. The ledger belonged to a man named Jacob Zook. He farmed 160 acres outside of Intercourse, Pennsylvania, starting in the 1870s. His grandson, in his 80s now, still lives on the same land. I spent an afternoon in his kitchen last fall. He pulled out a wooden box from a cupboard behind the wood stove. Inside was a leather-bound ledger, the pages music, brown and brittle, the ink faded to the color of weak tea. He turned to a page dated March of Music, 1887. His grandfather had written down the family recipe for what he called barn milk. It was the standard lime, skim milk, salt, and linseed oil formula, but there was one extra ingredient, alum, common potassium alum, the same white crystalline powder that has been sold for $1 or $2 at any pharmacy or pickling section for the last 200 years. Jacob Zook's note specified 2 tablespoons of powdered alum dissolved in a cup of hot water, stirred into the mixture right before application. I did not understand why music until I took the recipe to a chemist friend at Auburn University who works with historic building preservation. He explained it in 30 seconds. Alum is a mordant. It binds proteins and minerals together at a molecular level. When you add it to a casein and lime mixture, it locks music, the calcium, into the milk proteins and drives the entire cocktail deeper into the wood fibers. It is the difference between a coating that lasts 30 years and a coating that lasts 80 years. Auburn's own accelerated weathering tests on alum-modified lime washes showed durability increases of between 60% and 100% over the standard formula. The Amish families around Intercourse have been adding alum to their whitewash for at least 140 years. Nobody else got the memo. It is not in the 1936 USDA Bulletin. It is not in any university extension publication I have found. It exists in that ledger, in a handful of old family recipes passed down through Pennsylvania German households, and now in this video. So, the full finale recipe, the one you will not find anywhere else, is this. Music 4 quarts of skim milk, 1 pound of hydrated lime, 1/4 cup of table salt, 1 tablespoon of raw linseed oil, 2 tablespoons of powdered potassium alum dissolved in 1 cup of hot water, added last. Mix in a plastic or wooden container, never metal. Apply with a natural bristle brush. 2 coats 24 hours apart. Total cost for enough to treat 1,000 square feet of wood is under $30. Expected service life, based on the Zook family's own barn, which was last treated in 1943, is between 50 and 80 years. 80 years. You will never touch it again. Your children will not touch it. Your grandchildren might if they feel like it. That is what the paint aisle has been keeping from you. You did not just learn a recipe today, you recovered something. A piece of working knowledge that belonged to your great-grandfather and his neighbors, something that was traded away while you were not looking, replaced with a product designed to fail on a schedule. The men who built the barns that still stand after 150 years were not smarter than you. They just had not yet been convinced that the answer had to come in a can. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, music, you already know what to do next. You are going to the farm store this weekend? You are buying a bag of lime and a small box of alum. You are mixing your first bucket of barn milk. And you are going to feel something you have not felt in a long time when you look at your fence. You are going to feel ownership. Now I want to hear from you. Of everything I laid out in this video, the USDA Bulletin from 1936, the Penn State research, the Auburn tests, or the Zook family ledger from 1887, which one surprised you the most? Leave a comment below and tell me. I read every single one, and the conversations that happen in those comments are where the real knowledge gets traded. Do not stay silent. Someone else watching this needs to hear what you have to say. If this changed the way you look at the wood on your property, subscribe. This channel is not for everyone. It is for people who are done being sold to and who are ready to recover what was taken from them, one suppressed technique at a time. My next video covers the Amish method for keeping a basement bone dry for 100 years without a sump pump, a dehumidifier, or a single drop of electricity. There is a specific mineral they mix into the floor mortar that modern builders stopped using in 1962. And once you know what it is, you will understand why every basement built since has been fighting a losing battle. I will see you there.